We view the atrocities of Nazi Germany as a unique explosion of evil, a horrifying rupture in the civilized advance of the modern world. But the ideological road to Auschwitz was actually paved over centuries, leading directly into the heart of European and American colonial history. The official story of Western civilization is a sanitized myth. It is designed to hide the immense destruction required to build the modern world. The philosopher Walter Benjamin described this as the angel of history. While we see a neat chain of progressing events, the angel sees a single continuous catastrophe piling wreckage at its feet. It wants to stay and repair the damage, but a storm blowing from paradise catches its wings, propelling it backward into the future. That storm is what we call progress. The extermination of entire civilizations served as the foundational strategy of Western expansion, justified by this calculated logic of advancement. This architecture of racial classification began in 15th century Spain, during the height of the Inquisition. Authorities codified the concept of cleanliness of blood. Christian European blood was defined as clean, while non-Christian blood was deemed savage and unclean. The doctrine of discovery carried this ideology across the Atlantic, creating a legal and theological mandate for European powers to seize new lands. In a single century, over 90% of the original population of the Americas simply vanished. A deliberate willingness to eliminate whole civilizations for the sake of land ownership drove this expansion, prioritizing possession over human existence. Building the new U.S.-American race required the active, violent exclusion of Native Americans and the systematic importation of enslaved Africans. The foundations of the New World rested on a legal mechanism that made enslaving or exterminating other peoples morally acceptable, setting a permanent, violent precedent for future growth. By the 18th and 19th centuries, European philosophers needed a way to justify these horrific actions within a supposedly enlightened society. They replaced the idea of religious salvation with the secular religion of progress, turning historical advancement into a moral requirement. Western thinkers weaponized time itself, physically and conceptually forcing indigenous populations backward into a locked prehistoric zone. They were classified as relics of the past who did not belong in the present. The scientific revolution offered apparent biological validation for this racism. Evolutionary ideas were co-opted to argue that inferior races were naturally condemned to extinction. The philosopher Herbert Spencer championed this view, writing that imperialism served civilization by clearing inferior races off the earth. Genocide was rebranded as a natural byproduct of progress. The glowing rhetoric of the era promised to carry education, technology, and light into the wilderness. The reality on the ground was a forced retreat into darkness, as indigenous people, buffalo, and nature itself were violently pushed aside. Progress became a deadly mechanism that stripped colonized people of their right to exist in the present, making their extermination look like the inevitable course of nature. During the late 19th century scramble for Africa, steamboats and machine guns allowed European powers to rapidly plunder the continent. Throughout this expansion, the practical maxim governing Western actions was simple: exterminate all the brutes. The Holocaust represents the return of these exact colonial practices to the European continent. The systems of racial purity, systemic deportation, and industrial slaughter used by the Nazis were a common European heritage, honed and perfected in the colonies. Nazi extermination was the logical endpoint of Western colonial ideology, brought home to its own borders. The horrors of colonialism, slavery, and the Holocaust continue to shape our present reality. They are not safely locked in the past. We now live in the Anthropocene, a geological epoch where the exploitative human activity of the modern age has become a dominant planetary force. This shift coincides with Western colonial expansion and endless consumption, permanently altering the oceans, the atmosphere, and the diversity of life itself. We live in the ruins of this extraordinarily destructive period, feeling its effects in climate collapse and systemic inequality. We cannot escape the consequences of this history. We must finally dismantle the toxic myth of progress and face the truth, because the practices of domination are constantly being renewed today.